Morning, morning, monsters. Today we are talking about lobby design. So if you have missed part 1 of the lobby design chat, we talked about generally why matchmaking is slow, why matching up games happens, all the sort of barriers to that. And now we're going to start diving in. So this is really lobby design 2. We're going to start diving into the reasons for that. And the methods of management for that. So there is a technique called wait and play. It goes by a bunch of different names, but the most common place you will have found this is MMOs, and most notably looking for group tools. So this is a situation where we know matchmaking takes a long time, especially if you're trying to put together a certain composition of skilled players for specific content, which MMOs have this problem. So look for group tools became a thing to stop people shouting out. And don't worry, we will talk about social matchmaking in a future chat. This is focusing on wait and play systems. So World of Warcraft has 2 really good wait and play systems. One is the looking for group tool, which is while I am slaying monsters, I can get that wonderful little eyeball going, and it can start looking for people and going, who can we find? And we can specify what kind of roles I'm up for, what kind of dungeons I'm up for, and I can continue to play while all this happens. And I don't have to worry about how long this matches takes because I'm doing my questing, and when that queue is filled up, I can then be transported to the dungeon ready to play. So this really does solve a lot of the matchmaking quandaries. However, there are some issues with it. The first issue, and probably the most important, is when I am slaying stuff over here on this continent, and my dungeon is over here, there isn't necessarily, now this is solvable through preloading, but I have not necessarily got enough space, depending on game design, to have the first section of the dungeon preloaded. So when I push the sort of teleport button, I click that, there is now a load screen, and we've got to wait for this loading bar to fill up. And given that I've already been waiting a long time for this queue, that kind of sucks. There's also that secondary problem that the content that I am engaged in might actually be really sticky. I might be really interested in the quest line. I might be in a place where I don't want to push that button. And so you get a bunch of situations where you think you have a group complete, but then someone drops out at the last minute from that queue. And yes, you can penalize them for this, but it will happen. And that's your worst scenario in matchmaking, because if you've got a group of 4 complete and you need a 5th, and that's dropped out, then the chances of you having someone on standby that fits all your criteria to rematch and pop those people back in the queue, it becomes a really tricky problem to handle. So that's a tough part of wait and play. So that's the loading bar, and also the I don't know how I'm going to represent this, the say lollipop, really, the stickiness of the content. Yeah, it's kind of, those are big issues when you're dealing with this style of wait and play system. But it's a valid approach, and it's better than nothing, as in like the looking for group tool solves a big problem. However, aside from the stickiness issue, aside from the loading bar and the dropout issue, all of which happen to multiple wait and play systems, they're all solvable to some extent. The biggest issue is I have, so let's say you've got a smorgasbord of content, right? Everything from your single player campaign, and then your multiplayer campaign is dived into the stuff. I mean, you could even think about this of like, here's your veg, and then you've got your fish, and you've got your meat, right? Now the problem that we have is, let us say that a little person's come along and they're like, I'm really interested in the fish dish. But while I'm waiting for the chef to finish the fish dish, I'm going to go over and eat some veg, or I'm going to eat some meat, or worse, I'm going to go eat some bread over here. And these aren't as satisfying for me because I was craving fish. I wanted fish, but I fill up on bread, I fill up on veg, I fill up on meat. I spend my time on these activities. So by the time I get to the fish activity, well, there's a few outcomes. Outcome one is I have gone in and I basically fill up and then I exit, right? That is the worst scenario because A, I've clogged up the matchmaking queue. I've been attempted to match with a bunch of people. The systems have done stuff. Me dropping out of the matchmaking queue causes a whole bunch of hassle. But the worst thing is that player has gone into the game wanting a part of your content, can't get it, fills up on something less satisfying, so they're craving to play your game, and their satisfaction with your game has gone down, and then they have walked away, which means they have less. They're less likely to come back and repeat that experience. And this is a self-fulfilling prophecy, and you really can build up debt with a player through this system. Coffee is still lovely and warm. It really is a great way to start the morning. The alternative is that they are powerful, right? And then when they engage with that fish content, they're less likely to stick it out, right? And they do a partial run for whatever reason, because they have less tolerance, or their time ran out halfway through the run, or a whole bunch of stuff. And this, I would argue, is even worse than the first case, because not only do you then have to take this group and shove them back into matchmaking, and you have to do a partial match on a group, which is very tricky. The group themselves are frustrated. So you now, where this frustrates one person, this frustrates 5 people. So that is just an awful experience. But then the other issue is they complete it. And now the question here, when they exit out, and I'm just going to put a happy face here. When they exit out, and I know I've got all this stuff on my face, but it's the easiest way for me to explain this. When they exit out, how much of their completion of that dungeon run and how much of their completion of the content that they were seeking when they entered the game is dulled by this initial wait? Like, do they see that as a positive or a negative? It's one of those things you have to consider. Then another issue, if you're too good in other pieces of content or whatever, is they stick, as in they don't push the button, they don't enter into the matchmaking queue. So this sounds like a really good outcome because they have exited the game happy, but there's some issues. The one issue is you're partly frustrating the groups that are trying to match up, and you're partly frustrating that queue. But then the other issue is you're not fulfilling the loop of intention to reward to intention. And the bigger issue is if you're doing this and you have content, like typically this matchmake content in these dungeons or the ranked play or whatever will be more rewarding long term for you as a player than light content that can be engaged with in 5-minute chunks, right? So that's looks like a positive path, but it actually is a big strong negative. And I know that's counterintuitive. Don't you love the magic being ruined there by that little hover? And then the final state is they come through and it's almost instant, and then they go through, and this is the ideal. This is basically they spent as little time as possible in that state because there was already a bunch of people waiting and they've come through. But then really, is that wait and play system actually working for you at all? So that is the looking for group tool design, and where So you get some of the issues for looking for group tool design when the wait and play is engaging in normal content. Now, World of Warcraft has a second wait and play system, one that's not talked about as much and is somewhat derided, but is also more common, but is also easier to implement. And that is the Battleground lobby. Now, the Battleground lobby is really interesting. So in PvP Battlegrounds, basically what happens is you have a blocked off area, and this is common to a lot of games. This is not just in MMOs, transitioned over to MOBAs and everything. But you've got the two, starting areas where where the guys are coming in. You're coming in immediately off the load screen, so you're not waiting for other people's slow computers and slow connections to resolve their loading experience. So for you, that loading bar does not include artificial matchmaking or waiting on people. You're immediately in here. Then the other thing is you have tasks to do in this space, but they're minor beneficial tasks that they're not sticky, so you're not going to want to hang around and continue to do them, right? They're utility, so they're preparing you for the upcoming battle. So your mind space is engaged in, oh wow, I'm about to eat fish, I should go get the appropriate knife and fork for this. So this is things like wizards casting buffs and warlocks and all that stuff happening in the pre-run. But then the other big part of this is there is a big social and control element, and these two are the most underestimated. So the social element is we're here with other players that we're about to engage with as team members, and it gives us space that we don't necessarily have to engage with, but we can engage with to form better bonds with those teammates, pre-strategize, sort of work out that kind of stuff. And unlike the traditional voice lobby, which we dissed on really hard, it's not just a list of names where it's like Hackslayer 5 or whatever. You see their cool troll, or you see their cool elf or whatever, and you can engage through game mechanics. You can engage through waves, through a lot of positive non-verbal communication, jumping around like mad people, ducking, whatnot. There's a lot of ways people can engage in that space, and it's a more positive possibility space than the lobby with the names and just voice chat. That's not to say all interactions that come out of the space will be positive, but they will tend towards a more positive disposition. People will be nicer to each other generally here than they will be in a lobby with voice chat scenario. But then finally, the other issue is control. Now, control is very important and very underestimated by designers and hardcore gamers. Control is basically, I get to control my character. I get to figure out my controls, figure out my spells, configure my hotbar. If it's a shooter game, I get to sort of cycle through my weapons if I have a loadout or anything like that. You know, if it's Counter-Strike and I'm sort of getting through that buying process, it's hugely valuable. And then finally, the biggest one is no loading. No loading. So this is great because we see the tension of the countdown clock, right? We can have that, I'm just going to actually write countdown down because that's such an important part. With the play and wait strategy, when you implement with a physical lobby like this, you have that sense of, oh shit, it's going to happen. Oh shit, it's going to happen, right? You can run off to the bathroom. You can run off, make a cup of coffee or whatever. You know how long you're going to be in there because the countdown's already started. It builds tension. It's really great for keeping people engaged. You're less likely to drop out. But and when that countdown ends, we go straight into the action. There's no load screen. Now, caveat, some games with physical lobbies will actually have a load screen after the physical lobby. Sometimes it's quite a short load screen, but it's still a load screen and it's shit. It's just like, that's a fail. As a game developer, you have enough time, you know the content they're going into. There really shouldn't be any reason for that load screen. Preloading should totally be handled. So this is play and wait in its ideal form. And as I say, it doesn't sound like its ideal form, because I think if you asked a lot of players, and this is why it's confusing, if you asked a lot of players, would they prefer to do looking for group tool where they're continuing to quest, right? Or would they prefer to do a physical lobby, right, where they wait and prep? I think most players in a user survey, well, actually, I don't have to say I think, I know from user surveys I've seen, most players would actually opt for the looking for group tool. However, we know from numbers, and we know from sort of post-engagement surveys and like how it affects player bases, that physical lobbies trend better to the health of your multiplayer, to the health of your PvP or your PvE elements. And there used to be an element of physical lobbies in World of Warcraft for dungeoneering, but they're looking for group to replace that. But that will be a separate thing that we talk about, which is social matchmaking, which is going to be our last in the lobby design series. Other examples of wait and play. So this example I have not seen implemented in a game yet. I have done a technical demonstration. I have talked about it in internal and external talks. I have verified that it is possible. So this is totally doable with modern tech. In fact, it's easier now than it's ever been. And this is a variant on wait and play, which is wait and watch. So this is no means an original idea from me. Where this actually came from, or whether I saw this best implemented hilariously, is Sword Art Online. So in, I think it's the second season of Sword Art Online, there is a gun MMO arc. Anyway, during that arc, there is a scene where basically they're in a bar and they're having their little drinks, and they're like, yeah, I'm waiting for my match, blah, blah, blah. But then there is this huge collection of monitors, right, that is basically playing the games. Now, this is really interesting for a few things, right? First of all, the only way this actually works is if you have a reason to engage in that monitor, right? It's not a meaningful design if you can watch arbitrary games while you wait. What made it meaningful in Sword Art Online is they were engaged in a tournament arc structure, right? And you know that, hey, you're likely to face the winner of this particular match in your next match, right? And so this does a few things. First of all, from a matchmaking perspective, we know what we're going to match up with. Like, so this player here knows that they're waiting on this game. They can see, oh, this game looks like it's got maybe 2 minutes left in, so they're semi-committed to this, right? And then there's different ways of implementing this, and there's nuances in the design that we can go into. But they can sort of feel, while it's not a countdown clock, because we can't predict when that game's going to end. We can't predict when the winning shot's going to be landed. This player knows they care about this game. And by watching this game, they can infer knowledge on their next game, right? Likewise, if they know maybe after that they're going to face the winner of this and this game, you know, these two people are going to fight out, the winners of those two games are going to fight each other out and stuff. So they can, even if this game is in a lull, look at other screens and go, oh, right, I'm going to face up against these other players in the future. This works really well for 1v1 games, which traditionally have a really hard time with matchmaking and especially tournament structures. It deals really well with tournament wait times, which is a really hard problem to face, especially in amateur tournaments. In pro tournaments, there's a lot of money on the line and there's a lot of professionalism that keeps people in line. But in amateur tournaments, you have a lot of these issues. And it also works for team games, right? Because for team games, you can actually watch. But and you can then discuss and talk about your upcoming matches. And much like the previous physical lobby, if this is in-game and you have control and you have the social of seeing other people as they come out of their games and commiserating, because maybe, hey, I'm interested in this game, but while I'm waiting, this game finishes and I can commiserate with the loser in a lobby chat, like a physical space, and we can engage and we can go, oh shit, yeah, isn't that weapon totally OP, and da 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 da. We can have a positive engagement. Now, from a technical point of view, this has basically become easier because of Twitch and because of systems like Twitch. As in, it would be too difficult to run a simulation of multiple games at once. The Dota simulation for spectator mode, for instance, and many other games spectator modes, they can only simulate one game in spectator mode at a time because you are simulating the entire game. However, if you are parsing a video feed, especially a lower res video feed from a already muxed source like Twitch or YouTube or your own video service, it's much more plausible to deliver this to the players. Especially, and you know, if a player actually wants to go and focus in more on that, then you can deliver them the higher resolution stream. But yeah, video is totally the way to do it. If someone is actively engaged in spectating, and in-game spectator mode is always going to be more powerful because it gives camera control and stuff. But in a wait and play scenario where you want to be able to walk through the space, simulate the game. I mean, I'm saying walk through space, but walk through space as if it's a first person or third person game and you have controller stuff. If it is a StarCraft or something abstract like that, then, and if the game can be simulated enough, which it can, because StarCraft, you can actually boil down the simulation code quite nicely, then you actually might want to go for simulation. You might want to go for a sort of more abstract thing. But again, you want to keep away from that menu place, because that menu place leads to sort of boredom and toxicity and disengagement and people engaging in second screen activities. That's not to say people shouldn't engage in second screen activities if it keeps them around for the matchmaking, but you want them not to be pulled away from your product. You don't want them necessarily to drift and then not complete the matchmake, because that's the worst scenario. But all said and done, that is our lobby design to chat, folks. So that is the wait and play. Oh, here we go. That is wait and play. And as I say, I personally think the wait and watch, which I've not seen implemented well yet, is but you know, I've advocated for in certain scenarios, and stuff I can't talk about, stuff I can talk about, but yes, wait and play. And for those of you who are watching the recording, there will be another video soon on the next section of lobby design. But until then, we will leave you and we will go back to the live viewers. So ta-ta!